Thank you. And my part of the beginning is done. Carol Plew will introduce our speaker and presenter.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome. And
I know that's what this is.
yeah, that's right. He knows.
Okay.
Can't hear you.
I don't want you to. Now, the speaker tonight is Lenny Van Buren, and his topic is on town cemeteries, past, present, and forgotten. And please, you should pay attention because there's a test at the end.
Thank you, Carol. 1, 2. I'm doing the talking tonight, but Pat is the one that's really helped put this program together. Couldn't have done it without her. Town cemeteries, past, present, and forgotten. From the words of Clarence Foote, is it any wonder that our ancestors established so many family burial plots? Not even the city of Schenectady had a hearse before 1800. In the bleak hills of Duanesburg, it was a real hardship in stormy or very cold weather of an old-fashioned winter to carry the heavy homemade coffin on the shoulders from the little house or cabin to the grave. Even on a mild day of winter, it was often necessary to wade through the snow, the spot where the grave could be dug. Therefore, it was the most natural thing to seek the ridge or a knoll or protect the spot along the bank of a creek. Now listen to this very carefully. The ideas that the farmstead would ever go out of the family never entered the heads of those sturdy settlers of long ago. So maybe, they thought those burials on their property would be there forever. So think about that. This program dedicated to the memory of those many noble souls who departed, who spent their lives on the hills of Duanesburg, New York, in patient, faithful, helpful, loyal, godly efforts for the common good. This program would not be possible without the work of Clarence Foote. Clarence researched and published a memorial census of Duanesburg, copyrighted in 1935. He printed the book in his print shop, which is still standing on his family farm at Eaton's Corners Road. At that time, Clarence documented 55 cemeteries in the town, grave by grave, recording names, dates, and epitaphs. His method or the time period that it took him, we do not know. Clarence graduated from Oneonta Normal School and the former State College for Teachers in Albany. He was a teacher and principal for 28 years and a town of Duanesburg historian from 1933 to 1964 and again in 1966. Clarence was a descendant of early area families, Howards, the Frisbees, and the Youngs, which may have led him to his dedication to remembering the past and honoring our town's residents. In our country's early history, burials were made on private farmlands or churchyards. However, the New York State Rural Cemetery Act of 1847 changed that by authorizing commercial burial grounds in rural New York State. Clarence was born in 1892 and he died in 1979 in Avon Park, Florida. Ironically, he is not interred in the Town of Duanesburg Cemetery. His final resting place is in Bougainville Cemetery in Avon Park, Florida, where he spent his winters. This was common if snowbirds died in Florida, people from the north going south. It was quite costly to have a body shipped back up north, and the Florida funeral homes had a good sales pitch. Clarence is buried, his parents are buried in the Union Cemetery in Raymond's Corners. Pat and I have visited 55 not all. We visited many of the 55 cemeteries within the town. Most were off the beaten path and overgrown with only field stones marking the graves. And some were being cleared and tended by the property owners. In tonight's program, we will visit 8 cemeteries that include both community-based cemeteries and churchyard cemeteries within our town, and 6 of the lost cemeteries that were found in farmyards by Clark's Foot. So the community and churchyard cemeteries. The first one is Christ Episcopal Church Cemetery on the corner of Route 20 and Duanesburg Churches Road, to the left behind the church. The oldest burial was in 1823. Laid to rest under the church are James Duane in 1797, his wife Mary Livingston Duane, 1821, his daughter Catherine Livingston Duane, 1852, William North, 1836, and his wife Mary Duane in 1813. Have you been downstairs in the church, in the crypt, Steve? Well, I guess no one here tonight has been down there. It's been closed for years, right?
Oh, I was down there a year ago, Boy Scouts.
If anybody has anything to add to this program while we're going, just shout, raise your hand or something, because, you know, some people know things that I don't know. Next would be Brayman's Corners Baptist Church Cemetery. It's behind the Duanesburg, Florida Baptist Church. On the southwest is the church hall. Jess Abbey, who died in 1867, and his wife, Mary Ketchum, died in 1855. They were the only 2 burials listed in the 1935 census. The Duanesburg Presbyterian Church Cemetery, quarter mile up Duanesburg Churches Road on the left. The stairs from the original church that burned in 1951 are still there. There's a picture of the stairs. The oldest burial was in 1795, and Gordon Shufflebirds has just restored the holding vault, which, thank God he did. For both of the rural cemeteries, they've taken, the vault's gotten disrepair, so they, instead of fixing them up, they tore them down. But that's part of history. Well, thank God they saved that one. Good job. Gordy's right here tonight. John Fiddler's in charge of the cemetery. The Friends Cemetery in Quaker Street behind the meeting house. The oldest burial was in 1813. There are 149 known graves to date. In the back left corner, there are black slaves and Native Americans buried in unmarked graves. Quaker Street was part of the Underground Railroad. It is well kept. An active cemetery is now available for burial of cremains for its members. John Peters oversees the cemetery. I think I saw John come in tonight.
No, I'm not here.
Oh, you're not here? Oh, okay. Well, if you're looking for a spot, go see John. The Brayman's Corners Union Cemetery. On Herrick Road, half a mile up off Route 30. The oldest burial was in 1814. John, this is the old part of the cemetery here. And there used to be a chain link fence along the front with a gate into it. And John Hayes, some people, I don't know if that rings a bell, John Hayes, some people pronounce his name differently. Anyway, John removed the fence and the gate and developed a new section previous to his death in 1985. And this shows you the new section. So it doubled the size of the cemetery, and it's well taken care of. The brick holding vault has been taken down in that cemetery, and Matthew Ferry is in charge of the cemetery. And I say again, it is well kept. Maryville Cemetery was established in 1865 on Batter Street, beside Maryville Lake, on a 2-acre peninsula of land that was originally purchased by Silas March from James Duane. That's the old holding vault. That's been taken down. And if you can read that, get the sign. See that's the fence that would all used to be in front of it. Positively no parking or picnicking in this cemetery. Keys at Peak Store. So they kept it locked because it used to be a favorite spot for people going in for picnics and fishing and what have you. In 1973, Lion Peak and Jefferson Obrist revived the association. With little interest from other descendants, the grounds were minimally mowed, and bushes and trees took over the area that had no graves. In 1996, Janice Peak Black, Lion's daughter, became caretaker. Since 2008, the cemetery has been cared for by dedicated volunteers. The whole cemetery has been cleared of brush and excess trees. Many grave markers have been repaired and raised to their proper positions. Thanks to Bob Waddell and Travis Anderson for repair work to the chain link fence. Mowing and other improvements to the grounds have been made by Bill and Janice Black, Lee Peak, and Robert Peak. It is a beautiful spot. I have a connection. My great-grandfather, Dave Walpole, and his 2 wives were buried there, and 2 of his children. He had 2 wives. His first wife was killed down in Rotterdam at a train crossing. Hit with the train. That's why he had the 2 wives. People always wonder why, why 2 women. But anyway, so I have a special place in my heart for Maryville Cemetery. But that's where my roots really come from, Maryville. Duanesburg Village Cemetery is by the airport on Route 7. The oldest burial was in 1789. I think you know this fellow here? Okay. Michael Ryder, the earliest settler, was buried in May 19th, 1804. A Legends and Historical Marker, which you see here, provided from a grant from the Pomeroy Foundation, was placed by the roadside by the Duanesburg Historical Society in 2018. Michael Ryder's story is in Volume 3 of our Historical Society books. The cemetery is very well kept by Tony DeLuke and is still active. Bart McDougall and Steve Schrady oversee the cemeteries, and their families are buried there. The next one, the Grove Cemetery, Quaker Street, which I sometimes call my second home since I spent so much time there through the years, is on the east side of Route 395, like a Quaker Street Hill, just below the village of Quaker Street. It's only visible from Gibby's Diner parking lot. It was organized in 1873, and a holding vault was built in 1879, which is still standing. Down by the lower road, what we call the old road. It has 15 acres more acres and plenty of room for the future. To date, there are 205 veterans buried there. Of those, 11 are Civil War veterans. The book on the table behind me is about William Levy, one of the 7 Civil War veterans. The oldest date found on a monument in Grove Cemetery is 1854. We could say the cemetery was organized 1873. I've been told by old-timers that they moved people from farm cemeteries to Grove Cemetery after Grove Cemetery was organized. So I found 2 monuments that, there's one right here, 1854. We also have an urn garden in the cemetery for the burial of cremains. One of my first jobs when I was 14 was mowing and trimming in the Grove Cemetery. It took me 30 hours to mow the grass, mow with a gas push mower. It took about the same amount of time to trim with hand trimmers, which I did 3 times a year, later digging a few graves. I was kind of like Gordy Shuffleboard, right? We started as kids right on up through. I worked there as needed and was superintendent from 73 to 1994 and volunteered since. Jim Murphy is presently the superintendent of the cemeteries and is doing an excellent job. The Van Burens, my grandparents, aunt and uncle, my father and mother are buried there, and it would be home to Pat and I someday, plus others in our family if they wish to be. Go to grovecemetery.net for a listing of all burials, overview of the cemetery, its veterans, pictures of monuments, and many obituaries. It was program put together by Bruce Barton a couple of years ago. It's really been a wonderful thing. If you want to just pop the name in on the computer, it'll pop up, show you the picture of the monument, may have an obituary, show you the picture of like I said, the monument, and where in the cemetery, shows you on the map. Really a great job. Cemeteries of interest, the found cemeteries. How we're getting to the interesting ones. The Griffith Cemeteries on Chadwick Road, on the left before the I-88 bridge up at the elementary school. We originally thought that it had been moved because I-88 going through, I always heard, they went right to the cemetery, but, until you go to somebody's house, tap on the door, you don't find out. Anyway, they're great people. They showed us the cemetery. That's the monument. Usually the old cemeteries, they have one tall monument. And then everybody's got their small one. So you can, I know a month ago, Skip Coons, met him over and his wife over at Hank Berman's, which is farther over Chadwick Road. You can see the big tall monument from the road, 1,000 feet back. And there's a whole bunch of burials in there, but that one monument shows you the cemetery. Anyway, that's an unusual, that's a metal monument. It had fallen over, and the present owner of the property cleaned the cemetery and put that monument back together. Okay, there are 27 marked graves in that cemetery, the oldest being in 1801. There are at least 38 other graves with plain slabs marking burials.
Is there a name associated with that one?
Pardon me?
Is there a family name associated with
Griffiths is the family name. That's on the monument there. I didn't do research on the ancestors, but next cemetery is the Smith Cemetery. This is truly a found cemetery. Can you see a monument there? You got see that little spot? Look straight there. Anyway, the cemetery is on Tromber Road, about 1,000 feet in off Route 20 on the right at the top of a knoll. And I say we took this picture probably a month ago, so that's there's a stone wall around the cemetery. If you went in fall or winter, the vegetation would be down, you could see it better. Nathaniel Smith, M.D., was died May 29th, 1847, age nearly 90. This is the information off the monument. His wife Mary died January 15th, 1844, nearly 77 years old. Hiram, who was born in 1794, he was 17 at the time of the installation of this monument in 1871. He put the monument up in memory of his parents. The Batter Street Cemetery, or sometimes some people call it the Herrick Cemetery. So this is an old picture of it that we found through the historical files. And there's a picture we took about 2 weeks ago. It's along the road on Batter Street on the left, about 1,000 feet before Duanesburg Churches Road. The cemetery is on land once part of the Elijah Herrick farm. The oldest burial was 1803. Among those interred here is Elijah Herrick Sr., who was a local Baptist minister and been a captain in the Revolutionary War. Throughout the years, civic-minded youth groups, with the guidance of adults, helped care for the cemetery. Again, the story of this cemetery is in Volume 1. The Herrick farmhouse still stands today, is in the care of the Hughes family. It's interesting, you go to these cemeteries, but if you're allergic to poison ivy or anything, you've got to be careful. So you're limited time of year you can go in.
Lenny,
Yes.
when my boys were in Scouts, Troop 51 would go there and mow that 2 or 3 times during the year. They tried to get it before Memorial Day, before Labor Day, and we would all get out there, show up with lawnmowers. And one of the times I was mowing there, I was there for like 5 minutes, and I hit a stone, and the blade was bent, and I couldn't mow anymore, so I got to quit early that day.
I remember there were times it was trimmed down nice.
Yeah, they did a pretty good job. They would weed trim, string trim around the stones, and then afterwards the young Scouts got taken to Mariahville store for ice cream.
And Calamine.
The next one, the Tripp Cemetery on Barton Hill Road, quarter mile off to the left off of Darby Hill Road on the knoll. You go down, again, the vegetation is down. You can look up and you see a little bit of the wrought iron fence that goes around the cemetery. 5 generations of the Ezekiel and Mary Lawton Tripp family are included in 86 burials since 1798. Ezekiel was a pioneer speaker of Quaker Society of Friends in Quaker Street. From 2010 to 11, the overgrown and disheveled cemetery restored by property owners Bob and Adeline Thompson and their sons Rob and Jason. Not only was brush removed, but large trees taken down, gravestones properly placed, but the graves were researched, cataloged, and marked according to families. The restoration details and the touching story behind it is told by the family. Again, in one of our Remembering the Town of Duanesburg books, that's in volume 3. So if you're interested in some of this history, there are books that we put out in the past 10 years are full of a lot of these stories. County Line Cemetery is in Eaton's Corners, where the Sketty and County Line road, at the boundary. That's what I call the county line. You go up the little knoll, there's the line, there's the cemetery on your left. The oldest marker is 1826, and plain slabs indicate at least 125 more burials. The last one is a Stewart Cemetery. The Stewart Farm, this is a very interesting one. Shows you what can happen to cemeteries. Stewart Farm on Route 30 across from Herrick Road. If you went down Herrick Road, shoot across 30, you'd be right in the cemetery, which there's nothing there now. There were 14 marked graves. The oldest grave to be Captain Ezekiel Frisbee, who served in the French and Indian War, and also was a general in the Revolutionary War, who died February 18th, 1817 in Brayman's Corners. Also believed to have other graves in the cemetery. On May 29, 1971, the gravestones were bulldozed by the owner. He said that he did not know that there was a cemetery there. As a young person, I remember you drive by 30 and there's, 20 feet off the road, there are gravestones. The state historical marker, the blue and yellow, disappeared shortly before the desecration of the cemetery. So it was take the state marker down, bulldoze the cemetery. Anyway, again, that story is in volume 1, which we've been sold out of that. I've got paper clippings here that were in the Gazette in 1973 about the cemetery. That's the version of, they had names in it, which Pat thought maybe we should not put names in of the homeowner. The cemetery is now marked by this flat granite slab. Now, to me, that's a crime. Gravestones knocked over, and the town, I'm not supposed to get in this. It was put in by the landowner per the town's request. What a terrible thing for a person to do. And the Gazette article on the table tells the story of how poorly it was handled and thoughtless it was resolved. I mean, it shows you sometimes what you can get away with. And the story has names, the property owner, and there's another name in there. But that's, to me, the crime of the century. It shows you we've got to take care of these cemeteries and keep an eye on them. Because what happened, it's in the story, Ron Hawes, you probably know Ron used to live over on Herrick Road. One Sunday morning, he heard a bulldozer. And so he went down to Brayman's Corners and said, what's going on? And here's the man up on his bulldozer and nothing but dirt. And, Ron said, where's the cemetery? I don't know, there's no cemetery here. That's what started it all. Since the time of Clarence Foote's memorial census in 1935, there have been 2 more cemeteries found. In 2009, Thomas Dunn of Find a Grave found a Briggs Cemetery, 0.6 of a mile up Darby Hill Road on the right, on a hill in back of a newer home. There were 8 gravestones with 1 child buried there in 1844. I just stopped here this week to rang the doorbell, see if I could get a book, which there's nobody home again. I found out a dozen times and there's never anybody around the house. But anyway, somebody lives there, but I just didn't want to wander in their backyard. And after a request to the Duanesburg Historical Society for information on the Ferguson Farm Cemetery, Ed Putman told us that his parents bought the Ferguson Farm, which is on Route 20 in the I-88 interchange in Duanesburg. They bought the farm in 1943. There was a small cemetery in the pasture in back of the house with field stones and 2 small engraved markers. When I-88 was built, the cemetery was destroyed, and the Putmans found 2 engraved markers and kept them. And these are the 2. Martha E. Ferguson, 1/2/1858, 5 years, 17 days. It was marked, and this is her sister, Helen Ferguson, 9/18/1858, died the same year, 1 year, 1 day. Again, how things happened. 88 went through. Nobody stopped them. Lastly, an article in November 2004 issue of the Cobblestone Times Journal, it was stated that the Office of Renewable Energy siting allowed National Grid to destroy at least 2 cemeteries, one in Sharon and another in Duanesburg. Another article said that a cemetery off Humphrey Road was desecrated by logging in 2023. The owners wanted it to extract valuable timber before clear cutting for a solar project. We think there's a connection. And one of our members, Casey LeClaire, Casey's not here tonight, who grew up in that area, is investigating for us. You got to wander through the woods and you don't know what you're going to find. But that's where most of these rural cemeteries out in the woods, and in summer you may trip over a stone and all of a sudden you found a cemetery. I'm sure that there are other small family cemeteries that Clarence Foote missed. There are also 4 newer private cemeteries that I know of that have had burials since the past 30 years. The Holub property on Sketch Ridge Road, the Carlo property on Wedge Road, the Mott property on Skaterate Turnpike, and the Pogrzowski Cemetery on Skyline Drive. And 2 old farmers cemeteries that have been restored have had burials in recent years. The John Spriggs Farm, which is now the Vanderveen Farm on Sheldon Road, and the Vogts Cemetery on the Rufus Krauts Farm, which is now the Ostrander Farm on Suits Road, have had recent burials. They've rebuilt the stone walls around them. They did a beautiful job. And on the table are 2 copies of Clarence Foote's book, A Memorial Sense of Duanesburg, which he printed at his shop. The hard copy and the hardcover and the soft cover. A 2000 reprint of Clarence Foote's book, which includes Princetown, published by the Schenectady County Historical Society. Now, we've got a few here tonight at the table. They sell them for $20. The money, if you won't want it, we'll see if the county gets the money. We've got 5 books from them. We've got to give them the books back or the money. But anyway, if you're interested in these cemeteries, it's a complete copy of what Clarence Foote wrote back in 1935. So if you're interested in anything on history, where cemeteries are, the only tough part of it is, say, 500 feet from William Jones's barn. Who was William Jones? You've got it. Well, they've got it broke down to areas like Bragen's Corner, Featon's Corners. You're in a general vicinity, but you've got to find some of these old names to see who owned the property. A copy of the Civil War veterans book on William Levy, who he's buried up at Grove Cemetery. A one-page story of Bell Peck, GAR, who was buried at Bragen's Corner Cemetery. Map of the cemeteries of the Town of Duanesburg from the Schenectady County reprint, which is here, which comes from Clarence's book. And a Schenectady Gazette article Stewart Cemetery level, the one I told you about being bulldozed. I made a few copies. You know, that's interesting to read, to see what is going on in recent years. We've got some acknowledgments for tonight's program. Duanesburg Historical Society Archives, photographs by Howard Oldhouse. Howard is all over with his camera. No matter where you go, there's Howard. Thank God. He's preserving our history. History of photographs from the Van Buren collection, and history of the Arrival Cemetery and photographs provided by Janice Peak Black. That was very helpful. Thank you, Janice. Any questions? Yes.
Lenny, when you talked about the county line cemeteries, from what I understand from some of my neighbors when we were living on East Corners Road, there was an Indian burial ground right to the west of the county line.
Right. I think there was a state marker there, I think.
There was,
Yeah.
but I don't know that it ever mentioned.
Yeah. Sometimes these state markers get knocked down and they don't get put up. And sometimes...
Unless Howard knows about it, he'll make sure they get back up.
That's true.
So any questions on... Go ahead. Okay.
The County Line Cemetery, the first time I went there was still an iron bier or whatever where the coffins would be laid on, and it had a chain across it, and chain little hearts on it. And I thought that's very unusual. Did leave that, was the funeral director forget something? Why was that out there in the cemetery?
Oh, wow. I mean, these cemeteries can tell, from the ones Pat and I have visited, there's people now, if they've got one, they'll take care of it, try to clean it out so you can find the grave markers. And it's a little work, but we've got to preserve them. There's a gentleman here tonight that said he's restoring the one up on Church's Road, just above the Presbyterian Cemetery. I remember the white picket fence. He said, well, it's not white anymore. I mean...
It's not continuous either.
No. And we did find on Finch Road, off of Herrick Road, where the Finches used to live, the house, we went back there like 10 years ago. Is that? Anyway, probably 15 feet from the house was all these field stones laid up. And just like years ago, they were just put in, at least they weren't destroyed. Now, up in Grove, we've still got an area we call it the Potter's Field. Years back, if you had no money, you'd be buried in the Potter's Field. And we've got one area there's probably 8 or 10 field stones. One of our previous superintendents says, yeah, we can take them out so I can mow them. No, it's history. We don't know who they are, but it's just history. That's all people could, afford back then sometimes, just the field stone. So any more questions? Yep.
Back in the woods of my house, there's a Native American grave, which is about, maybe 7, 8 foot long, but it's all round stones in a mound about this tall.
Oh.
You don't touch it. My kids know about it, and a few other people know about it.
Yeah.
Just interesting.
Well, that's all got to be protected. Even like I said, being buried on your own private land it's great, but like the old timers, they thought the farm was going to stay in the family for years. Well, as soon as you sell your farm or your property, you don't know what's going to happen. Okay? Any more questions? Okay, thank you for being patient with me.